Hello, I'm Michael Cantrell, and you are listening to the Prison Officer Podcast, a place to have a conversation about the forgotten cops that work in this country's jails, prisons, and correctional centers. A place for me to try to make sense of a career spent working inside the fence with some of the greatest people that nobody sees or recognizes for the important job they do to keep this world safe. If you love this podcast, hit the follow button, or better yet, share with your family, friends, or coworkers. Hello, and welcome back to the Prison Officer Podcast. You know, whenever the discussion of the roughest, toughest prison comes up, there's always several names that come to everyone's mind. Alcatraz, Sing Sing, Leavenworth, Joliet, and of course, San Quentin. Opened in 1852, San Quentin State Prison in California is one of those violent prisons that has become part of our national culture. A prison that currently houses more than 3,300 inmates, 700 of those in the prison's condemned unit. San Quentin has been immortalized in movies, TV, literature, and even a Johnny Cash song. Well, my guest today, Ron, he spent a career working at San Quentin State Prison, and he's here today to tell us his story. So welcome to the Prison Officer Podcast, Ron.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks for having me.
I appreciate you coming in here and letting us hear some of your story. Let's start off. I always like to start off and find out how people got to corrections, because not many of us stood up in the fourth grade and said we were going to be a correctional officer when we grew up. So
Right.
Where did you grow up, and kind of how did you get to that point that you went to work at San Quentin?
Yeah, I grew up in Tucson, Arizona. And after high school, I went into the Navy for 10 years and got out of the Navy out of active duty and decided I was going to be a police officer. So I got on with the California State Police, which doesn't exist anymore. It's Highway Patrol now. But so I got in with that. And then I ended up going to the Gulf War for a year because I was still in reserves. After I got back from that, I decided I didn't want to be on the streets anymore, and I decided I was going to go into corrections. And I went into corrections and got right into San Quentin State Prison.
Did you know somebody that already worked there, or how did that come about? How did you discover that job?
I did not. I didn't know anybody. I just, living in California in the North Bay there, San Quentin is a name that everybody knows, obviously. And I started talking to people, and they're telling me how much money correctional officers made there because of the overtime, and it was a little bit easier. You didn't have all the eyes on you, that type of thing. You had a little more, I guess you could say, leeway on doing your job without somebody videotaping you. So that's how I got into that, and there's a term, Mike, that if you want to be a cop and work in a circus, join corrections.
Absolutely. So I know that you knew San Quentin and the myth around it and how the public thinks about it. So what was it like walking, as a rookie that first day in behind those walls of San Quentin State Prison? What was that like?
Man, I'll tell you what, the history of that place, people don't realize, and I'll share some stuff with you. The original prison was a ship that was anchored out in the bay until the prison opened up in 1852. That place, it still the dungeon is still there with everything still on the walls. It's got its own town. San Quentin is actually a town. It's actually a corporated town. It's one of the few prisons that I know of that you can live on in the housing there. There's 40 houses, that type of thing, apartments right there on the grounds. You can live there if you want to. And as you say, you mentioned San Quentin to people in a restaurant and their eyes light up. Well, same with Leavenworth, places like that. You mention those names and people know. They don't even have to know anything about corrections. It's the name because of the movies and so on and so on and so on. So when I walked in that place, I walked in looking at the history more than I was the inmates. And then when I walked in, I went, oh, crap. One officer to every 200 inmates. I'm going, okay, I don't have my gun on me anymore. Even though in California, in corrections, you have a PR-24, you have your your OC pepper spray, that type of thing. And you have massive gun coverage. California, unlike other states, they don't mess around too much when it comes to officer safety. A lot of inmates get shot, a lot of them. But walking in and walking through a yard, as you've done in your career, you walk through 200 or 300 inmates by yourself, it wakes you up. It's a wake-up call.
Absolutely.
People need to realize that correctional officers, it's a very dangerous job. It's very dangerous. You need to go in any prison you're working in knowing that you're probably going to fight that day, and you might have to fight for your life. So it was a wake-up call.
Absolutely.
So
what do you think, other than the violence? Oops, sorry. What do you think, other than the violence, what gave San Quentin its notoriety? Was it the fact that, Johnny Cash did a concert there? Was it the fact that it was, that there was songs and books written about it? What was it that gave San Quentin its notoriety above everything else?
Well, unlike what most people want to think about Johnny Cash and all that good stuff, had nothing to do with the notoriety there. The notoriety on San Quentin is, you got Department of Corrections, you got Department of San Quentin, and the inmates will tell you that go there. That place was a madhouse in the 60s and 70s. Madhouse. You know about the George Jackson escape attempt, which we'll talk about. The gangs there. Okay, people don't realize that all of your known gangs originated from San Quentin or Soledad. That being the BGF, the Black Guerrilla Family, Darien Brotherhood, and MN, Nuestra Familia, the Mexican Mafia, all originated from Soledad and San Quentin. That's what gave that prison the reputation it has today. And as I said, you talk about correctional officer and prison guard. When you work at San Quentin, you're a prison guard. If you claim correctional officer, you're going to be asked to leave. They don't want you there. You're not a correctional officer there. You're a prison guard.
Right.
And you know the difference between prison guards and correctional officers, Mike?
Well, go ahead. What's the difference?
Difference is correctional officers
I do know the difference, but...
Yeah, correctional officers go by the rules. Prison guards make them up.
Yeah.
So...
Well, and, I worked at Missouri State Pen for a while, and those places that, like San Quentin, Missouri State Pen, Leavenworth, they're at a different level of violence. You're dealing with a different level of inmate. I like to call them criminally educated. You're not dealing with just your run-of-the-mill inmate, and you can't treat them the same as you do your run-of-the-mill inmate, or you'll just get eaten up.
You exactly. And I worked the shoe units in death row, and I enjoyed the shoe units because, at least in the shoe units, the inmates knew where they stood. They knew where they stood. They had their little hour a day to get out, and that was it. And if they messed up and they got stupid, SOS, stuck on stupid, inside a shoe unit, especially in California, well, guess what? They got taken out the hard way, and they got dealt with accordingly. And that's just the way it was.
Right.
Okay. Now, all that has changed.
Yeah.
All that has changed, Mike. About mid-90s, they came in and they changed all that. They wanted all the dinosaurs out of there. Okay? No more prison guards. We don't want prison guards. We want correctional officers. So, when I first went in there, I was taught to be a prison guard. I worked with guys who were there in the 60s and 70s. There was a sergeant there.
Wow.
Sergeant Wardy had 50 years at San Quentin. 50. He started he started in Alcatraz. And his only job was to go around and tell new prison guards on how to thump inmates. And that's how you learned.
Right.
That's how you learned.
Yeah. Yeah.
My first time,
sure.
I was up on a gun tower and there were two inmates fighting. I did not shoot. I got taken off the tower and I got taken into the sergeant's office, and the sergeant said, How come I'm not dealing with 2 dead inmates right now? Yeah, that's the way it was there. They did not mess around.
Well, in many ways, California has, set the standard for a lot of the way we do things in prison. I mean, you guys were really the first ones to have a supermax when you built Pelican Bay up there, and that was to help San Quentin's yard, basically, wasn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And Pelican Bay was the standard for prisons for the future. Governor Pete Wilson said, if every prison was ran like Pelican Bay, we would have no inmates because they wouldn't want to go back.
Right. Yeah.
It's a rough place. If you ever get the opportunity to go to Pelican Bay, you certainly should take a tour of it. It's quite a unique prison.
Yeah.
Very, very unique.
Oh, I'd absolutely love to do that.
San Quentin, too, you got to remember, San Quentin started the CCPOA, California Correctional Peace Officers Association, the union, back in the 1950s.
Okay.
Which set the standards for other states to start unions and all that. California was one of the first states to certify their correctional officers under post peace officer standard training. So, when you went through the academy, you were post certified. So guess what? When I finished with retiring from San Quentin, I went to the sheriff's department in Arizona. I didn't need to do anything because I had my post certification. So it worked out well.
And how long's your academy for that? It's
in California, it's 16
Isn't
weeks.
Your academy like 20 something?
No, it's 16 weeks.
16 weeks.
Corrections, yeah.
Yeah.
16 weeks. And you have to take the post test.
You look at some of the other prisons, even the federal system, they have a 3-week academy, which now is really down to a 1-week national academy.
And I'm going to tell you, it's ridiculous. It's
California's,
ridiculous. When we would have our union,
you can't.
Well, when we would have our union, we'd have our union things every year, and we would go to other states and try to promote them to go unionize, because that's what's going to get you, number one, to pay.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to get you better training. It's going to up your academy. It's going to give you the authority to be post certified. That's what unions do. I'm going to tell you something, Mike. The CCPOA was the strongest union in the United States at one time. Very powerful. Very powerful.
Wow.
Okay. Oh yeah. Right. You could go into work and get away with, the expression, I'm going to use it, with murder, because that union had your back. 100%.
Right.
I ended up being the vice president of the chapter for 8 years there. And, officers would get in trouble. We know what happens. They always get in trouble. But I'm going to tell you something. For the most part, the wardens didn't want to mess with the CCPOA. They didn't want anything to do with them because we had a big bite. We had a very big bite.
Right. Right.
And unfortunately...
Strong.
Oh, yeah. Unfortunately, a lot of the wardens there were some good wardens. And I'm going to name one of them, and I know she won't mind. Jeannie Woodford was the best warden ever to be at San Quentin State Prison. Fantastic warden. She was an officer there when that place was insane, so she knew what it was like. And she backed us up all the time. Well, things started changing. When I left there in 2006 and went somewhere else, which I can't name, but I went somewhere else, another agency, and I came back. And when I came back, there was a warden there who had changed everything. Prison guards, he wasn't going to accept that anymore.
Right.
You're going to be correctional officers. Well, he knew I was coming back, and I said, I don't think so. I'm going to change it back the way it should be. Oh, me and him went at it. He tried to fire me, that type of thing. Didn't work out, though. So, the place had the history of wow, you're a prison guard. You're not a correctional officer. That's the kind of history that was taught. Well, that's all gone now. I've been retired from there for going on 12 years. Doesn't exist anymore. Some of the guys that I did work with, they're associate wardens now. And they're running it the way they have to run it now. So it was unfortunate. I stay in contact with one guy only that I went to the academy with. That's my brother, and that's about it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So let me back up a little bit. So you worked in the condemned unit, the death row.
Mm-hmm.
I believe California's got one of the largest death rows in the country.
It is.
And some of the most, of course, infamous inmates are there because California, with the gangs and everything out there. So tell me about death row. What was that like working there, and what were some of those inmates you worked with?
Well, death row, I had a very good lieutenant that I worked for. Lieutenant Egan was his name. Very good guy. Top of the line. He let you run your tier the way you ran your tier.
Mm-hmm.
Now, of course, he demanded you will do your job. Okay, the inmate will get his meal. The inmate will get his shower. But you will run your tier the way you want to run your tier. And he never got in the way of that. So working death row there, I looked at it because a lot of prisons, if you're on death row, you're on mainline. Well, not at San Quentin. You're separated from mainline. Okay, even though you're still considered mainline, but you are separated from the general population. So, I had some characters. Absolutely. I had Richard Ramirez, a Night Stalker. Richard Allen Davis, Mr. Three Strikes, if you know about him from California. I had Tukey Williams, founder of the Crips. I had some characters, but I had a rapport with all of them. As long as they did what they were supposed to do and respected me, I gave them that respect back. Okay. I would sit and have conversations with guys like Richard Ramirez, who was a total nutcase. Okay. Like me and you were talking. I would talk to him all the time. But the second he messed up, you know what? Okay. Time to pay the piper. You know what I mean? Guys like Tukey Williams, Stone Cold Killer. But, he and I had a good rapport. He never gave me any issues. Okay, fine. As long as they didn't mess up, I gave them that respect. Now, as you know, Mike, that didn't mean I was going to do things for them. I gave them what they had coming. That was it. Right. Nothing more, nothing less. You're going to get your shower. Sure. You're going to get your meal. Okay. But if you cross me, I'm going to go get 3 of my buddies and we're going to pull your ass out of that cell. All right. And you're going to get disciplined. And that's the way it worked. That's the way it worked there. Right. You've been gassed before in your career?
Yep.
Yeah. It's not fun.
Not a whole lot, but I have had that happen a couple of times.
Yeah. I've actually been stabbed at. I had a spear stabbed at me through a cell one time. Okay. Guess what? The rule book just went out the window. And that's the way San Quentin, that's the way it was back then. When you break the rules, there are no more rules. If you're not going to follow the rules, we're not going to follow the rules. And we're going to do what we need to do. Right. And that's just the way it was. Sure. But it's not like that anymore, unfortunately. So,
Yeah, well, the world's changed.
It has. And we would get...
The whole world's changed, yeah.
San Quentin would get a lot of people in there. We would get to, Mike Farrell from MASH, Danny Glover from the movies there, the Lethal Weapon movies. They would come in all the time and talk to the inmates and stuff like that. Danny Trejo. I don't know if you know who Danny Trejo is. He plays in the badass
absolutely.
movies.
Yeah, great actor.
Right. Well, he was an inmate in San Quentin in the 70s. Did you know that? Well,
I did. I've read a lot about him. Yeah.
Yep. He would come in a lot and talk to these guys. And one of the nicest guys you ever meet, man. I talked to Danny Trejo, I don't know how many times. One of the nicest guys. But he wanted to come in there and tell people what it was like. And you don't have to go down that road and that type of thing. So really cool guy. Really cool guy. Yeah. If you go on to YouTube, you'll see a video by Metallica that was done in North Block. And it's all real inmates. One of the few prisons that allowed that. They did a video with a song in North Block, and you'll see all the inmates going crazy in there. All real stuff. that was not a good day when they did that. But it went off without any incidents.
No, even Missouri State Pen had a couple of people who came in. They used to let the community come in, play softball against the inmate teams. They used to have music in there, but I think San Quentin's always they've really had the, I guess, headliners. Is that the way to put it?
They had the headliners.
A lot of famous
they
people come through San Quentin.
Yep, Ice-T was there. We had a baseball team too, the San Quentin Giants, which when I left there, I had a good rapport with one of the players. Very good rapport. Pretty good guy. He just, he messed up. He ended up getting out and is doing real well now, actually. He had a baseball signed for me by the whole team because I was one of the supporters of the team. I helped get the real San Francisco Giants, the baseball team. I managed to get some of the players in there to help coach them and that type of thing. So, there were some good things being done as well. Cool. Which in corrections, you can't let that get confused, though. You can't. And a lot of people go, oh, well, okay, if you're going to help the inmates, but you're not helping the inmates, you're doing your job. You're rehabilitating them, okay?
Right.
You don't have to necessarily treat them like a piece of crap unless they are a piece of crap. And that's the way we always looked at it.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, it always falls back to respect, and respect goes two ways.
Bottom line. It's there are people, unfortunately, reporters being one of them, who always want to make things look good. And let me tell you a story about that. So there was a lieutenant there, Lieutenant Vernell Crittenden, one of the top-notch guys ever to exist in corrections. He was all about officer safety. That's what he was. Nothing more, nothing less. He came to me one day because I was the VP, of the union. And he said, the warden's letting in his reporters to do a thing on Black August. Now, for those of you who don't know what Black August is when an inmate by the name of George Jackson, the founder of the BGF, the Black Guerrilla Family, attempted an escape out of the adjustment center, ended up killing several officers, several inmates. So every August, the BGF and the Kumi will celebrate by killing a white officer. That's what they celebrate with. Well, I was about to let that happen, and it didn't. Those reporters were never allowed in to make this look like a grand old thing. Interestingly enough, when that happened in 1971, and George Jackson got out of the AC, out of the adjustment center, with hostages, the individual that shot and killed him, I knew very well. Okay, Dick Nelson was his name. He ended up becoming an associate warden at San Quentin. I worked with his son on death row. You can still see the gunshot holes through the windows at the adjustment center. They never replaced the windows. They left them there. So
wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And believe it or not, that tower that was adjacent to the adjustment center, there was a Gatling gun in there. And that's what they used. It was a Gatling gun.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. A lot of people don't. George Jackson never made it out. Now, of course, there's talk that his attorney brought because he had a gun. And there's talk that his attorney brought it in for him. After that incident, his attorney disappeared, but was never, ever charged with that incident. Yeah. It could have been anybody that brought it in, but everybody in the world knows who brought it in. So every August, you got to be careful there. Well, in 1997, myself and 4 white officers got jumped by the BGF, and they were going to kill us. It was during chow. We let them out. As they were coming back, they jumped us. Us against about 6 people.
Right.
Well, when you got something like that going on in a prison, help's not far away. It's going to get there very quickly. But I tell you what, Mike, that was the longest 2 minutes of my life. Okay? The longest 2 minutes of my life.
Oh.
I don't even remember what I did. All I remember was taking my PR-24 out and hitting people because they had knives and,
right.
I mean, very large shanks. And I will never forget that. I would never forget that, because when we went to court, and I didn't realize I had done it at the time, I ended up hitting one of those guys pretty good and knocking out most of his teeth, you know. And the funny thing is, he actually came up to me and said, I got to give you credit. He goes, you are one brave little sucker. I'm only 5'4". This guy was like 6'2", you know.
Right.
And I told him, I said, well, you're trying to kill me. What else was I supposed to do? You know, but every year that prison still locks down for Black August, because of that.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. It's very, very interesting.
Well, and you talk about the leader of the BGF there. You mentioned earlier about, San Quentin. That's where a lot of the gangs that we have throughout our prisons these days started. Can you
BGF?
talk a little bit about that? What do you know about the beginnings?
Yeah, there in Soledad are the two main prisons where all the gangs got started. BGF, Aryan Brotherhood, the Nuestra Familia, the MA, the Mexican Mafia. All those gangs got started at those two prisons, and they still exist today, and they're still ran from those prisons today. Okay. Now, a lot of people will say, what about the Crips and the Bloods? Well, the Crips and the Bloods are not gangs. They're disruptive groups. Okay. As you know, gangs have to have a structure. They have to have rank. They have to have, their creed and all that good stuff. So people need to understand that Crips and Bloods are not gangs. They're just disruptive groups. Okay. You know what Crip stands for, don't you, Mike?
Right.
Do you know what it stands for, the word Crip?
I don't right off.
It stands for cowards run in pack.
Well, yeah. I mean, they're not stand up out there on the streets. They're picking on civilians.
Well, yeah, exactly. And we would get, and then and then you've got the Southerners and the Northerners, the Hispanic groups. Those are not gangs either. They're just associates, is what they are. It's like a lot of people think that Hell's Angels are a gang. Hell's Angels are not a gang. Hell's Angels are a bike club. They're not a gang. The Mongrels are not a gang. Gangs are there are big gangs, and those three are the biggest ones that have been around since the 50s. Long time. Okay.
Right.
And they're still very active, and they're still ran from both those prisons. Two of the biggest guys, the Ayala brothers.
Tell me if I'm
go ahead.
Tell me if I'm right here, but the California Aryan Brotherhood, now did they start first, or did they split off from the Aryan Brotherhood? Because those are now two separate gangs, the California AB and the regular AB, which the regular AB's been brought down a little bit in stature from the feds going after them. But did those start off as the same gang?
Well, California Aryan Brotherhood will tell you no. They will tell you no. They will say we are the originators of everything, and that's why they're separated now, basically, because they have that little issue going on. Okay, so from what I understand and from what I know from talking to some of the big shot callers out there, it started in California. It started in Soledad and San Quentin Prison.
Right.
Yeah,
and that's what I've always heard. I was just wondering if that's the way it was looked at out there.
Yeah, well, they all want their fame, of course.
Absolutely. So did you work as a correctional officer your whole career, or a prison guard? I'm sorry. Your whole career, did you go into any of the special teams or into investigations or anything?
No, I basically become an instructor. I became a tactical instructor and for shooting on the range, obviously. So I became a range master, and then I was also a self-defense instructor for quite a few years. In my last 10, 12 years, that's what I did there. Mainly just doing that, which was fine. That way I could pick my overtime, so that was nice. Also, I don't know what they call it in Missouri, but we had IST, so in-service training. So I taught first response,
Right.
all that good stuff. Mm-hmm.
So you get to mentor or got to mentor a lot of those newer staff coming in. How was that? Was that something you really enjoyed, being able to pass this stuff down to them? What did you see there?
Well, yeah, I did. I enjoyed passing down what we would call the legacy of San Quentin. But unfortunately, most of the newer ones, especially my last couple of years, they didn't want anything to do with that. Nothing to do with that, because they were top professionals now. You see, we're not going to do that. Oh no, I'm a top professional. I don't want to do anything. I don't want anything to do with that. And it was unfortunate, because it kind of, everything that I grew up with in that prison, and one of the guys I still keep in contact with, we talk about it all the time. Wow, what happened to that prison? It became a real prison now. It's no longer San Quentin. It's now a professional, well-ran machine. We didn't want that back then. We wanted to run the machine. You understand what I'm saying?
Sure.
Yeah.
I went through the same thing in my 30-year career. You know, I started off at Missouri State Pen. That was a prison that was built in 1837. So absolutely, I know about working inside those old rough prisons, and then ended up my career in Washington, D.C., in administration, having to take a different look at everything from above. I don't think I ever lost and I think this podcast shows that, I don't think I ever lost the fact that, I'm still a prison officer at heart. I'm still a prison guard. And I was kind of like you. I got hired on. They were changing the name of Missouri State Pen to Jefferson City Correctional Center. They were changing correctional, prison guard to correctional officer. And mine was one of the last paperworks that still said prison guard on it. So I'm proud of that fact. I'm proud I got to watch the whole change. I say the whole change. We're not done yet. There's a lot of change coming. Kind of on a current topic. What do you think about this? Biden just, he's going to get rid of all past offenses for marijuana possession. Now, I know that there's very few inmates, if any, that are currently in prison for that, but how's that going to change, the way how am I wanting to say this? We're looking at crime totally differently these days. We're minimizing a lot of what used to be a crime. And it seems like a blind eye is getting turned towards a lot of crime that's occurring. You got any thoughts on that? I'm just throwing that out there.
Well, yeah, the way I look at it, Mike, it's simple. If the DA is not going to pick up charges on things like marijuana, that type of thing, and cops are out there wasting their time, then you know what? I'm almost for it, to be honest with you, to say, fine, let's concentrate on the big stuff, then the big fish. Somebody that wants to, grow their little farm out there somewhere, which really is almost legal anywhere now, let them do it.
Right.
Let them do it, because if the DA is not going to do anything about it, cops can't do anything about it. I've got a good friend who's a San Francisco police officer, and she constantly tells me, I have no authority anymore. And I tell her, then don't do anything. You know what? If they're going to pay you to sit at the precinct and eat donuts all day, then do it. Then do it. Absolutely.
Right.
Things like, when I got on with the sheriff's department in Arizona for 6 years, I used to mess with the sheriff there, and I would say, why don't you let me show you how to run your jail? And the first thing out of his mouth was, I don't think so, because you were a San Quentin prison guard. So,
right.
You know what I'm saying? The reputation's there. But yeah, crime nowadays, I mean, let's face the fact, it's just like the gun laws. Okay, somebody goes out and shoots up the school and everything else. Well, gosh darn, let's get rid of guns. Really? What's good? That's not going to do anything. That's not going to do a damn thing. Okay?
Yeah.
It's not getting rid of the guns. It's enforcing the laws that we should enforce when some knucklehead gets arrested and then is paroled.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of that, and I hate to get we may be getting off subject here, but it seems like we're in one of those lulls, because if you look back through history, crime has went up, and then we got hard on crime, and we'd build prisons, and we'd grow our law enforcement, and crime would go down, and then we'd get lax on all of it, and crime would go up. I know, and probably the same with you guys, some of the biggest buildup in the California system was the 70s and 80s. You guys built a lot of prisons there. The federal system, the 80s and 90s, built a ton of prisons. And a lot of that was response to crime that was going on the street. I think right now we're in a lull, but I think that's going to turn back up.
Mm-hmm. I agree with you. And just an interesting thought for you, Mike, just to show people correctional officers are cops. People need to understand that. So when they're around, trust me, things are going to, be at a standstill. San Quentin, the town of San Quentin, is deemed the safest place on the continent, believe it or not, because there's correctional officers there 24/7, and they live on the grounds.
Right.
It's deemed the safest place. Okay.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Mm-hmm.
You guys are post-certified.
Correct.
So do they use you outside of the prisons? Do you guys get called out to do other stuff?
Yeah, we have been used. During the Rodney King riots, we were used for that. They took us and put us out in the towns to help out with crowd control, that type of thing. Yep, absolutely. Yeah, and that's why I say, every state needs to adopt that system. They need to make their correctional officers post-certified, just like they do the sheriffs that work the jails in the counties.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Any changes? I know right now the states that I'm around, recruitment and retention are really tough for a lot of these prisons. Are you seeing that out there in California with the people you're still in contact with?
Not at all, because California correctional officers get paid a lot of money. Okay. They get paid a lot of money. For the most part, I know correctional officers that were making more money than the governor was with overtime. So never a problem recruiting out there.
Wow.
Yeah, never a problem, because they make, and again, that comes with having a strong union, okay, and getting the pay that you deserve. I know that I talked to some correctional officers out here in Vermont, and when they told me how much money they made, I almost crapped my pants and went, you can make more working at McDonald's. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot of places that are catching up. I believe DeSantis in Florida just gave them 60%, a 60% raise, which, a lot of this sounds like huge raises, but a lot of it is just bringing them up to where they should be.
Where they should be
with regular law enforcement.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Minimum, and I don't know out there where you're at, if you guys are paid salary or hourly, but in California, you're paid salary, but you get hourly after overtime, when overtime kicks in.
Right. Lots of overtime out there. Was that something that
sometimes too much?
Something you were able to take advantage of?
Oh yeah. Well,
I remember those days.
Well, in California, you don't have seniority till you got at least 15 years in. So you can, after about 15 years, you can pick your overtime. But if you got between, your first 5 years, you're going to get overtime whether you want it or not. So yeah, lots of overtime. Absolutely.
Cool. So, and I don't know, where's Manson at? Is he on death row in California or in San Quentin?
No, he is not.
Probably the most famous.
A lot of people think that Manson was on death row. He was never on death row. He is actually at, let me think. He's actually at a CMC, a medical facility.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. I worked at one of those for a while. That's, you get all these famous inmates, and that's where they gravitate towards because they can get better treatment usually and less security.
Well,
but
it is. It is. I loved working death row because, like I said, I had a good rapport with all those guys until they messed up. But for the most part, They didn't do much of nothing. They sat in their cells. They watched TV. They read their letters. They wrote letters. I had a good rapport with one, probably the best rapport I had. And I won't name him because he's still going through his rights to appeal. But he was a former police officer.
Right.
And he committed some serious crimes. But I had a very good rapport with that guy. He would actually key me in on a few things once in a while. And so it worked out. It worked out well. It did.
Excellent. So, I don't know, a new group and a whole new generation of correctional officers coming in and working in prisons. And I don't think I just talked not too long ago on the podcast about how they're being mentored. And I do see a lot of older staff who just go, well, they're not listening to me, I'm not talking to them. And I don't think that's the way to approach it. So what's some of the, advice that you would give these new recruits coming into prison? What would you say are some of the number one things they need to pay attention to, that first year working as a correctional officer?
Don't fall into the trap. Don't fall into the trap of that manipulation under inmates, because I don't care how much training you have. Inmates, let's face it, they're good at it. They're very good at manipulating people. That would be my biggest thing, because the second that you bring something in or you do something for giving them a phone call, they just manipulated you by you giving them a phone call. All right. To me, because, again, the days of thumping are over. Unfortunately, they're over. So now you got to, if you're going to be a professional, then you got to act like a professional. But unfortunately, inmates, they know how to manipulate those professionals more than when we were in. They really do. Okay. So I would tell the young people, hey, go and do your job. That's it. Don't do nothing else. Just do your job. Don't go beyond that. And you know what? When you go home every day, you go out those gates, you just did your job. You're good to go now. Keep your staff safe. Yeah. Keep yourself safe. Go home every night.
Yeah. Yeah. Making sure that our staff leave in the same way they came in is the most important thing at the end of the day. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
You've retired now. How's so you've retired now? How's retirement treating you? Or
retirement's good. Well, I can't get away from certain things. I'm actually out here in Vermont, doing some training with some of the fire departments, because I am a certified EMT and paramedic. So I am helping out with some stuff there, doing some technical rescues with some of the departments, because I was a technical rescue with the sheriff's department. Swift water rescue, cave rescue, that type of thing. Just the other day, I actually rescued a dog that had fallen down a 40-foot crevasse, and I had to go in and get the little guy. So wow. I am doing stuff like that now. I hope to start traveling here real soon. So after winter's over here in Vermont, me and the wife are going to go out and hopefully, get some traveling done and enjoy retirement.
Oh, absolutely. That's what I hope for all of our correctional staff, and I think it is a contrast there for all the time you spent in San Quentin, and most of it, 99% of it, thankless time for everything that you did there, and then this week you get to go be able to save a puppy there. That's both sides of the coin there. There's nothing more different than what you were doing and what you're doing now.
Right. And one thing too, Mike, I want to say to all the correctional officers out there, the ones that are retired, the ones that are just starting out, when you're a cop on the streets, you get thanked a lot. Well, people aren't going to come into the prison and thank you for what you're doing. Okay. People aren't going to come in and say, thank you for keeping these convicted killers, and molesters and people that carjack people and rob people. Thank you for keeping an eye on them and keeping us safe. They're not going to do that. You guys are cops. You work the inside. You're not going to be thanked ever. you got to thank yourselves for it. Okay. And that right there, you should be very, very, very proud of doing. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I want to thank you for coming on the Prison Officer Podcast, sharing your story. And I'd like to, when we get the chance, maybe we'll do this again sometime. I just love getting to hear the stories of everybody across not only this nation, but the world, that we all deal with a lot of the same stuff in behind those walls and fences, but it's almost like a brotherhood and a sisterhood that goes around the world. Because if you've ever worked behind those walls, you understand what everybody else is going through behind those walls. And that's kind of what this podcast is about. So I appreciate you coming on here and sharing your story, teaching us about San Quentin. And hopefully we can do this again sometime, Ron.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I enjoyed it.
Okay. We'll talk at you later. Have a great day.
Okay.
If you enjoy these podcasts, the best way to support the Prisoner Officer Podcast is to share these episodes with your friends or family on social media. Let me invite you to visit www.theprisonofficer.com. If you haven't already, check out the Prison Officer Podcast on Facebook and click that little follow button. Or leave us a message, or better yet, leave us a review. And if you're listening to us on Apple Podcast, Google, or Spotify, please click the subscribe button. Till next time, I'm Mike Cantrell. Watch your back, and please take care of each other out there behind those walls.